Welcome, everyone. We're going to begin today with a land acknowledgement. Let us reflect upon the lands upon which we reside. We come from many places, and we want to acknowledge the ancestral homelands and traditional territories of Indigenous peoples who have been here since time immemorial, and to recognize that we must continue to build our solidarity and kinship with Native peoples across the Americas and across the globe. San Diego Mesa College is built on the ancestral, unceded homelands of the Kumeyaay people, and we acknowledge and honor their tremendous contributions to our regions and thank them for their stewardship, past, present, and future. Please join me in a collective breath. As all of our liberation is entwined, so is our history. We also acknowledge that this country was built up from the free enslaved labor of Black people, and we honor the legacy of the African diaspora. We honor the legacy of Black life, knowledge, and skills stolen to violence and white supremacy. With this acknowledgement, we recognize a duty to give honor through our work and continue to stand up for racial and social justice every day. Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. My name is Wendy Smith, and I am one of the facilitators for today's event, which is being recorded to share with those who are unable to attend. I teach English 101X courses with the theme of ethnography and ethnographic writing. Qualitative research is relevant to students' lives and careers, prioritizing their lived experience, their observational powers, and their diverse perspectives. And students bring a lot to the table. Many thanks to my inspirational co-creator, Katlin Choi, who suggested this series. Today, we're excited to present our speaker, Darla Cooper, educational leader and research expert. Darla, shall we get started?
Yes. So if you're ready for me to dive in, I'm ready to dive in.
We're ready.
Okay.
Thanks, Darla.
Sure. So so honored to be asked to come here and share my story a little bit in the hopes that someone finds something useful in my journey and any advice that I may have to offer, any lessons that I've learned along the way. So I was asked to kind of respond to some questions about how did I get here? Where am I and how did I get here? How did I get into research in particular? And the kind of research that I've done probably most recently. And since this is an English class, to share a little bit about my relationship with writing, and then just some closing thoughts and reflections slash advice, again, based on my own experiences. So I will start by introducing myself. I'm Darla Cooper. I am the executive director for an organization called the Research and Planning Group for California Community Colleges, otherwise known as the RP Group. And we serve as the membership organization for the researchers and planners who work in the California Community Colleges all across the state. And we offer professional development, conferences and workshops, and then we also conduct unique research studies as well. And I'll share a little bit. I think you've seen a little bit one of the projects that we worked on, so I'll talk a little bit about that later. But to answer the first question about, how did I get here? I stand on the shoulders of others. I would not be here primarily if not for my parents. They supported me financially. I'm glad that they and fortunate that they were able to do that. But they also supported me emotionally, kind of psychologically, mentally, to always told me that I could do it, always supporting me. So that was super key. And I recognize that not everyone has that and how very fortunate I am to have gotten that support. And then, just building my own self-confidence, working hard. And then at some point along the way, I say at many points along the way, making connections with different people, and just kind of who sometimes can make that difference and open certain doors for you. So making those connections are key. My bachelor's degree is in psychology, and I'll talk a little bit about how I landed on that major. I originally started my career as a counselor. And my degrees and my studying was in that area. I was fortunate to have a work study job that allowed me to do some peer counseling. So I got to be able to experience it to make sure that's what I wanted to do. And it did help confirm that. And I was able to do additional counseling jobs as a graduate assistant in grad school before getting my first kind of professional job as a counselor. Um, when I was in graduate school, originally I was planning to be a therapist. And in the very first semester, taking the very first class, I realized that I wasn't cut out for therapy, but I liked the active counseling. And it was when I was confused and wandering around that I went and saw a career counselor. And in that meeting, I had kind of, I guess, an epiphany where I'm sitting listening to her and I said, hold on, how'd you get your job? Because I want to do what you're doing to be, you know? And so I learned that I needed to get a master's degree. And so that's what I ended up doing. And then I worked full time for most of the time I was in graduate school after completing that graduate assistantship. So that's a little bit about, the background. In terms of research, again, I was doing the counseling. Um, and I got introduced to research through an internship that was required as part of my master's program. And I didn't want it. When my teacher suggested it, I was like, that sounds boring. I'm going to be a counselor. Why would I need to go do research? But she just basically said, shut up and go do it. And sometimes that's what you need to do. You just need to listen to other people. Sometimes they know more about you than you do. They know you or can see things that you're not quite ready to see yet. So I go and I take this position and work with it was with the vice president of student affairs and doing this survey research. And it turns out I loved it. I got so into it and just had all kinds of ideas and this and that. And she was like, okay, great. Love your enthusiasm, kind of slow your roll. You've got a lot to learn, but I appreciate, your initiative and your enthusiasm. And again, it's a longer story than we have time for, but 3 years after that, she ended up hiring me full time to be a researcher. And that was kind of the beginning of my career in turning that corner into research. And then after that, I went, and this was all at a university. And then after that, I went and went to the community colleges because I felt like that was going to be a better fit for what I wanted to do and why I got into education, which is to help people capitalize on the opportunity that education can provide in terms of living a higher quality of life and being comfortable and happy and having options. And I said it can make a big difference, and it has made a difference in my life and my family's lives of being having this education. I think that for me, the university was a little too elitist for me, and I said, and I wanted to focus on how can I help the students who aren't here. How do I help them get here to the university? And so that's why I made the switch to community college. And I worked as a director of institutional research at 3 different community colleges before coming to the RP group. And I started here as the director of research and evaluation, and then some years later became the executive director, which is basically the CEO for the organization. And I said, we are a nonprofit, a separate, organization, but we work within the California Community College system with partners, all different kinds of partners, chancellor's office, as well as different colleges and the faculty and presidents and things like that. So I said, we're very involved all over the system. So what kind of research have I done? Well, I actually started out as a quantitative researcher, meaning the statistics and running the numbers kind of point. But somewhere along the way, I became a qualitative researcher, and I studied all of those methods in graduate school. But I started doing focus groups and interviews and really enjoying it. And I realized at some point that it was kind of harkening back to my days as a counselor, being able to be in that space with students and listen to them and ask them questions about their experience. And it was like, so it's kind of getting my little counseling fix, so to speak, by doing the focus groups. And I really enjoy, and I still, to this point, even though my job is not to do research anymore, it's to run the organization. I do make time to go out and focus groups and interviews, especially with students. I think it helps keep our research grounded. If I'm in the space with the students, learning directly from them about what works and doesn't work and what they need and what they don't need. So I'm glad that I'm still able to squeeze that in from here and there. But I think right now I would describe myself as well as our organization as a mixed methods research organization, in that we do both. Mixed methods meaning quantitative and qualitative. So again, the quantitative, the numbers, the statistics, but also the qualitative piece, which is the focus groups and the interviews. And it's really about blending the two, because I think the research is much stronger when you have both. So you have the numbers that kind of give you the big picture, but the interviews and the focus groups help you drill down into understanding more of okay, so the numbers said this, but why? How? And it's hard to get at some of that, obviously through the numbers. So that really helps to be able to go and talk to people and say, well, why is it this way? Or why did you make this decision? Or how is this working or not working? I mean, I can see it's not working, but how is it not working? Or what specifically is not working? So you can have that back and forth with people. So I really do enjoy that. And I said, and I think the again, the research is so much stronger when you're able to tell kind of both angles of the story. So I believe we shared an example of a study that we've done. It's part of our Through the Gate research initiative, and it's really looking at transfer specifically and honing in on especially the students who do like a lot of work, right? They've completed all or most of their transfer requirements, but then they don't transfer. So it kind of makes you wonder, why would somebody put in all that time and effort and money to not go to that next stage? So that's really what our Through the Gate research project, that's where it started. And then what was odd about it is we had done all the work before COVID happened. And it takes a while to pull all that information together and put the report, get the report together. And we didn't finish it until like right when the pandemic hit. And so everyone was a bit distracted when that happened. So it wasn't the best time to kind of release information. So we put it off for a time period. But the other thing that happened was we realized that once we had been in the pandemic for a while, we realized this is going to be a major game changer for a lot of students in terms of the disruption to their path. And so there's been just so many horrible, unfortunate stories that I've heard from students related to the pandemic. And so we did a study. And we reached out to the students who were really close to transferring. They hadn't transferred yet, but they looked like they were on the path. And to ask them, how's it going? Are you okay? Like, is there anything kind of like you need? What's missing? What are you dealing with right now? And there's some interesting, results. I think one of them was we found out that a lot of students did not know that changes had been made to like the rules, so to speak, on both the community college and the university side to try to help students keep their momentum, right? So for example, accepting pass, no pass. And there's certain classes where you have to have a letter grade, to be able to transfer it. So they kind of relaxed that during the time. There was the excuse withdrawal, where it just wouldn't count against you. It's like you never took the class, essentially. So there were just different things that happen on both sides to try to ease that. But what we found in the survey was that most students didn't know anything about it. They didn't know that those changes had been made, that those opportunities were available to them. We also learned that there was a good number of students who said, yeah, transfer's not my priority. School's not my priority right now. And that's, understandable. So I said there were lots of other, I saw Wendy put the link in there. But there's lots of other information in there about how students were affected. But I think we're going to need to, that was done kind of last year, like, so we're still in the midst of the pandemic. I think we're going to be seeing the impacts of that for years to come. The students who started school, I did a different study where we talked to students, and they had been in school their whole freshman year online, and that's not what they signed up for, and they were missing that. And it's like they felt like they didn't really know what it was like to be a college student because they hadn't really been to the college. And again, it's different if you sign up for an online program, then you are expecting that. But when you are trying to, your expectation to go to college physically, and then you're not able to. So it was interesting. And then just hearing how students had changed their plans in some cases, choosing to go to different schools. I talked to at least a few students who were planning to go to the university out of high school, but was like, we're not paying my parents. I am not paying all that money to go to a university online. So I'm just going to go to my local community college for a while, and I'll transfer later, and as I said, it's not what I signed up for, basically. So it was an interesting study. And then another thing, which I think Wendy will share with you, is something that we did that we don't normally do with all of our research, but we probably should, is our audience, the audience for most of our work, it are people like Wendy and Katlin. They're the teachers and the college presidents and the people who work in the system office. It's the practitioners, right? It's the educators. But we thought there was a lot of information that came out of this study that would be really beneficial for students. And so we did create a resource with them in mind, and we worked with actually the statewide student senate to try to make sure, because we speak a very jargony language amongst ourselves, and we sometimes we need to be reminded that students don't speak this language, and that we need to speak their language. We need to put things in terms that mean something to students, instead of what, if especially if it's for students. And I see a lot of times, I look at surveys, I look at things, and I'm going, who did you write this for? Because how would a student know that? Why would a student know that? So that's why we wanted to partner with Student Senate to get that student perspective. But I think that we hope that resource is somewhat helpful. It's meant to be kind of a guide, and it's meant to kind of lay out your transfer journey and what you should or could be doing at different stages. Because if you think about it, the person who is in their first semester of college needs to be looking at and doing different things than someone who's in their third or fourth or fifth semester. So we try to lay this out, not necessarily by semester, but by how many units you've earned. Because again, everybody's not going full time. So it might take you 2 or 3 semesters to get to 15 units, and then another 2 semesters to get to 30, things like that. But in that time frame, so by the time you reach your 15 units, you probably should have done these things. And it's all based on talking to students who, were successful, and kind of basing it on what helped them, but also students who, shared where they could have used more help, where they could have used more information. And so we tried to incorporate that as well. So I hope that those, resources are of interest to you. I will just say that all the research that we do, and I invite you to explore our webpage and look around, although again, disclaimer, it's mostly written for faculty and staff and administrators. But I just want to say that for us, for our organization, we don't do research for research's sake, like just for the sake of doing it. We are really committed to elevating the student's voice. They are central to pretty much all the research that we do. We're always asking the question, well, what do the students say? What do the students think? What do the students feel? What do the students need? And really trying to bring that into every space, every project, that we do, to remind the people who work at these colleges and in our system that we're here for the students. And if we're not including them, if we're not listening to them, we're not asking them, then what are we doing? What are we doing? So the other thing is we're not just doing research to like get it published in a journal, or something like that. I mean, we do that, but our primary focus is on making the information useful to, again, the people who work at the colleges so that they can look at their practices, look at their processes, look at their rules, look at how they interact with students. And again, base it on, so they don't have to go out and do the research themselves. We're kind of doing it for them and saying, here, this is what the student said works. This is what they said doesn't work. This is what they need. This is what they don't need. So really trying to inform practice, policy, relationships, all of those things. And so that is really central to like every project that we take. We're asking those kinds of questions. Ultimately, is how does this help students? Whatever the research project is, how does this help students? The professional development, even it's one step removed in some case, but ultimately our goal is back to, okay, so you go to this workshop, you learn this thing, and how does that help students? And again, it may be a couple more steps there. It's kind of like the whole, what is it, 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon or something, where it may be some degrees in between, but I said there still needs to be a connection to how does this help students. So the piece I want to talk about now is me and writing. I think sometimes there's assumptions that just because you can do something and you can do it well, that you like it. I'm here to tell you it's not always true, at least not in my case. I've never been one of those people who loves to write, whether it's creative writing or writing a report or an essay or whatever it is. It's not something that I particularly am driven to do. But I realized that it was necessary. As obviously in school, you have to write a lot, but in most careers, you have to write something, whether it's emails, whether it's reports. And so knowing how to write well is a good skill to have. And knowing how to write appropriately for different venues is also, because the things, the way you would write an email, the way you might write a report doesn't necessarily match, or doesn't usually match how we speak, and knowing kind of the difference between the two. So like I said, I did, I consider myself a decent writer. And I said, I've worked at it over the years. I mentioned earlier, I chose psychology as my major. Well, this actually connects to and reflects my relationship with writing, and especially as an undergraduate trying to pick a major. I had narrowed it down to psychology and sociology. And to be honest with you, I actually preferred sociology in terms of the content and what, the subject matter. But sociology requires a lot of writing. And I was just like, I really like this subject, but I don't think I want to write that much. And then psychology was over here, and it was interesting as well. But it was mostly multiple choice tests, at least where I went. That's not every psychology program, just letting you know. But at my particular university, that's what the deal was. And I went, yeah, I'm going to go with the one that I think I can finish, which also kind of leans into my advice. That one of the pieces of advice I have for when I counsel students, whatever you pick, and there's few exceptions, but most of the time, whatever major you pick, you're not stuck. You shouldn't think about your major as sticking you in a place. And well, if I have a psychology major, then I have to be a psychologist or a counselor. Well, I'm kind of proof to say, yeah, I actually ended up starting off as a counselor, but I'm not doing counseling anymore. I haven't done it for years. So your path can take you in a lot of different places. And your major should not restrict you. It should actually, it's more about the doors that having a degree in something opens. So oftentimes, I said, again, there's a few exceptions where you do have to have a certain bachelor's degree to go into certain fields, like engineering. They usually want you to have an engineering degree. Nursing, they usually want that. Sometimes computer science, accounting. There's a few exceptions, but for most of the rest of us who are not interested in those fields, you just need a degree. And I often have told many students, pick something you like, pick something you're good at, pick something you want to learn more about, and you will get, it will be much easier to finish. And I'm putting aside all the things, the challenges that we all have outside of school and even in school to getting through. But you don't want to add studying a subject you don't like to that list. There's enough challenges to getting through school. So at least you should be trying to study something that interests you. And again, that you will be motivated to finish. Um, Back to the writing piece. So like I said, I thought I was a decent writer. And then in graduate school, pretty early on, I took a class where the entire grade, my entire grade for the class was based on one paper. And that paper had to be 25 pages. And I was like, I at that point had only written 15, and that was a struggle. That was a struggle. And I'm like, how am I going to make 25 pages? And I was freaking out a little bit. And sometimes I think back, why didn't I drop that class? I don't know why. I think probably the teacher told me it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And I said, okay. And so I worked this, this whole semester on this paper. And long story short, my paper ended up being 40 pages. There was a minimum of 25, but there was no maximum. And so when I did that, and I got an A on the paper, and I did that, and I went, huh, maybe I can write. Maybe I'm a better writer than I think I am. And that was like the confidence booster that I needed. And from that point forward, I still didn't, I'm not going to lie and say, and then I loved writing. No, I still didn't love writing. Sorry, Wendy. But we have a good relationship. How about that? We're good friends. Good friends with writing. I can do it. I love when it's over. I love the final product. I love the accomplishment of it. But I needed that confidence was more important than and the skills, right? So having the skills and having confidence in my skills, for me at least, was more important than loving writing. And I said, I think a lot of people feel that way about math. Actually, I don't think, I know. A lot of people feel that way about math. They have what's called a bad relationship with math. And it would be wonderful if we could figure out ways to help students. They don't have to love math. You can't get everybody to love math. But if we can get them to have a good relationship with math and to feel confident and comfortable with their math skills, that would be a huge win. But that, I digress. That's math. We're talking about English. So the funny thing about it is, at this point, because of all of this work and how long I've been doing this, I am now kind of the main editor for most of our writing that happens in the RP group, and helping other people with their writing. And that really comes from me having a really good editor when I was young and starting out kind of my writing professionally, right, for work, and having someone who I describe, and this is a long time ago. I'm older than I look, but thank you. But we didn't have track changes back then. So she would have me print out the report, and then she would use a red pen to do all of her edits. And I always said it looked like she, cut herself and bled all over my paper, because that's how much red was on every single thing. But over time, as I took her edits and learned, there was a lot less red on the page over time. But I said, that's the other key. And another piece of advice I would offer you is, if you have teachers who take the time to give you detailed feedback, edits, whatever it is, look at them, take them in. If you don't understand them, ask questions, because that's how you become better. That's how I got to be a better writer, was taking the feedback and going, oh, I see how I could have made that clearer. Oh, I see how I, grammar, whatever it is. So that would be another, kind of piece of advice. And people call me a grammar nerd at this point, because I'm the one going, that's not where the comma goes, and that's not where an apostrophe goes, and that's not how you use that word, and you're supposed to use this word. And it annoys some people, but oh well. But I have my assistant and we get into whole grammar conversations. It's quite hilarious to us, boring to most other people. But um, anyway, just to kind of close out with a few thoughts. I feel like I need to address the elephant in the room, so to speak, which is the intersection of race and gender and age. And uh, that has been a part of my career, my life, obviously, and how I show up and how people have a certain expectations based on how I look and whatever they're assigning to me in terms of age or gender or race. Um, there's the issue of how those things affect whether you feel like you belong, whether you feel like you deserve there, whether you stand out, um, and not always in a good way, and whether you feel welcome, whether you feel that people want you there. So all of that, kind of comes together. And I will say that for most of once I got to undergraduate and through graduate school and throughout most of my career, I have been the only, whether it was the only woman sometimes, the only person of color, the only woman of color. I, that has been my experience most of my life, again, since grad school. And needing to learn how to do code switching and knowing, how I needed to speak in different environments and what I could and couldn't say and how I could and couldn't say was a way to kind of survive and advance through it. But I will be honest with you, I find myself doing it less and less because of how long I've been around and the positionality that I now have as a CEO. I've also been in this system for over 20 years, so I have a certain reputation. And so I'm able to show up much more as my whole authentic self in spaces than I probably did 10 or 15, 20 years ago. So I'm aware of that. And I recognize that that is a privilege that I would say I've earned it. I don't think anybody gave it to me, but through my hard work and presence here. Um, it's been hard work to not let other people's views of me and their assumptions about me affect how I go about my business. I have definitely been challenged in different, spaces and places. And I said, you know what, I'm going to be me and I'm going to do what I do. And I kind of have had an attitude of, you'll see. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And you'll see that you were wrong, basically, about me. Because I know myself. I know what I'm good at. And they'll see, or they won't. And then I'm not going to let that be my problem. And again, I'm not trying to say that I've never had doubts, self doubts. There's imposter syndrome. Some of you may, experience, be familiar with. Um, but when I'm having doubts, when I'm having those feelings, those kind of crises of confidence, I seek out help. I ask for advice. I ask for counsel. And from friends, family, colleagues, mentors, mentees, even asking, and I think for me, I've learned a lot. Still have a lot to learn. There's always learning, um, and I'm still learning to trust my instincts. I'm much better at doing that than I used to be, but there's still those times where sometimes you have to be quiet, you have to be still, and you have to listen. And a lot of times your instincts will tell you, do this, don't do this, that kind of thing. So sometimes it's like but we question, right? Our instinct will tell us that, but then we start to question it. And that's the part where you have to kind of push that back and go, no, I think this feels right. And to have the faith, right, to step out on that. So just last piece of just some closing advice, some of which I've already given, which is um, one of the main things I tell students, and I have different mentees and people that I talk to, is be open. Be open to the possibilities, because you never know where your opportunities are going to come from. I did not get here based on a plan. I did not have a plan to be CEO of a nonprofit. Not even like 10 years ago, I didn't have this plan. I've been in this job like 5 years. So 10 years ago, this was not in my plan, but an opportunity presented itself. And I said yes. And here I am, which was, again, not part of the plan. And I would say there have been several places along in my career where I didn't plan it, but an opportunity came up and I said yes. So be open to those opportunities because, again, you never know when they're going to come. Be flexible, be nimble. Again, expand your skill set, get out of your comfort zone. You got to push yourself to try new things and go those places where you may not be as confident or comfortable. Push yourself. Confidence is key. If you've noticed, that word came up a lot in what I shared with you, but know that only you can build your confidence. You cannot rely on other people to build your confidence. You have to build it yourself. You must be intentional about it, not hoping that it just happens to you, but that you are being intentional. Um, Again, trust yourself, trust your gut, or trust the little voice in your head, if that's however that manifests, for you. And then do not be afraid to ask for help. None of us, myself included, get to where we are alone. So ask for help, and people will help you.
Thank you, Darla.
Thank you.
That was such a good talk. And there were so many important things. I started taking notes on things I wanted to remember for myself, things I wanted to remember for my students. I mean, that's just so rich in experience and thought. So thank you for that. I'm wondering if anyone has questions for Dr. Cooper. You can put them in the chat if you like, or just shout them out. Well, while we wait for our participants to marinate a little and see if they have questions, I had, oh, there's one, I think. Yes, okay. This is from Amanda Woodrum, and she says, I'm a major who is apprehensive about transferring and hopefully to eventually work in the nonprofit space. This talk was very helpful. Thank you. Any advice on how to approach professors to assist with research?
Oh, that's a good one. I think what a professor wants is professors love their own research. Okay. And so they want students who are interested in what they are researching. So the first piece of advice would be to find, someone who is doing research in something you're actually interested in. So it doesn't feel like a little less like a job, and you really, it's a real learning experience for you. And I said, if you show, in most cases, again, nothing is absolute, right? But if you show that interest, a genuine interest in the subject matter, then that faculty member is probably going to be more likely to say, "Huh, okay, come on in." You want, because they're going to look at you and go, "This person is here for the right reasons." Right? They're not just trying to check a box or put something on their resume, or they're not just looking for a letter of recommendation. They're actually interested in this particular subject matter, and they love people. Professors love talking about their research. They love doing their research. So that would probably be my best advice: is try to find a good fit, and then show your interest.
That's great advice. Yes, that I heard a voice. I think of an assistant. She was really a work study student who just happened to have some similar interests as mine, and she was so quick. She was taking a stats class at the time, and I taught her how to use the basic skills cohort tracker. And I taught her about throughput, which she didn't quite get at first, then big light bulb, and she really
Mhm.
got it. So I could say to her, for example, one college was saying, we can't offer this course in summer because students don't do well. And I said, Jen, Check the basic skills cohort tracker, see how those students are doing in that class in summer, puts in some number, whips it out, and there it is, right? Those students are doing fine in summer classes. And she became very fascinated with it, and how low some of the numbers were when we had a lot of remedial classes. Remedial classes did not help students. They were actually harming them. And it was fabulous, really, to have not just her being able to understand how to run some of the numbers for me and print them out in an Excel sheet, which was amazing, but that she got really excited about it and was with me on, the numbers that looked good, the numbers that looked bad, and how it could change. And that was very exciting.
Yeah, we don't always have the opportunity to do the research that we want to do. Sometimes you're doing what someone else has asked you to do. So when you do have those opportunities to pursue something that interests you, that's what gets you jazzed.
Yeah.
That's what makes you finish. That's actually advice I usually give to people for their dissertation. Pick something you're really interested in because the dissertation is a slog.
Yes.
And if you're studying something that you aren't jazzed about and you don't want to know, if you think of it like a story and you want to know how it ends. And so if you don't really care how this story ends, you're just not going to finish. You have to want to see how the story ends. But this difference is you're writing the story. You're doing the research. So that's like one of the biggest pieces of advice. And I would say, for students obviously not pursuing a doctoral degree who aren't doing a dissertation, anytime you have the option to choose what you're studying, what you're writing, go with something that really interests you. Because I said you'll be much more likely to finish the work. Because again, you want to see how the story ends.
Mhm. And I tell my students with their writing for any class, even if you're not interested in the subject or you've lost interest in it, find a way to be interested. Sometimes it's like finding a tiny little fairy door in the woods that you have to search for, but you have to find that tiny door of interest to keep yourself going in it. Because if you're not interested, it's not going to be a good piece of writing either.
That's true. I know I've done some bad writing when I wasn't interested.
Me too.
Good.
So if there are no more questions from the audience, I have one question for you. I had students fill out a Padlet, as you know, with some questions they had in case we had a little time. And one thing that seemed to come up over and over again, which is kind of curious, that, well, first of all, I know that you're not just a number cruncher. You don't crunch the numbers and then walk away, right? Your heart is in this research. I know it is. And so And I know you're a kind of advocate for some of these things, right? Like for more students transferring. That's something you definitely believe in and how you can have more students transfer. But what about as far as policy and progress in that? Do you feel like you've had an impact on policy and progress, or do you, to some extent, have to let it go to the colleges and to the system itself to make the changes?
That answer is kind of both, yes and. Um, a prior study, which I didn't talk about and didn't share, it's called Student Support Redefined. And we came up with these 6 success factors. And again, it's all based on what students told us and their experiences. But there are 6 things, not the only 6 things, but 6 key things that students need to be successful. And we saw that we didn't know what would happen. You never know how people are going to react to your research. And the response was overwhelming, positive, overwhelmingly positive in terms of the fact that it resonated with people. And it gave them a structure. For some people, it gave them a structure that it's like, yeah, I'm doing these things, but I didn't know how to describe it. I didn't know how to think about it. So now I have this framework to where I'm like, yeah, I'm helping students get directed and focused and nurtured and engaged, connected, valued. And they think of this. And even though that study is almost 10 years ago, people still talk about the 6 success factor because what we came up with in that study is lasting. It's fundamental. It's easy to understand. And it's not going to change anytime soon because it's so fundamental. Students regardless of what's happening in our system, students still need those things to be successful. And so we saw um, colleges adopted up and down the state in a variety of different ways. I've also seen it kind of manifest through initiatives like completion by design, guided pathways. It shows up in these kind of different places, and so there's that legacy of just helping people understand these are key things, and if you can kind of structure the way you support students in and out of the classroom, and you're hitting those 6 factors, you've done a lot of the work to helping students. um, I think kind of the other side is like sometimes you just have to do it and let it go. um, One of our things is that we're not a policy organization, we're a research organization, and there's a lot of organizations that do both research and policy. And it's something that we've talked about, and never say never, but we try to make sure that we're putting our research in front of the people who make those decisions, whether that's at the local level, you know, making sure that the presidents and the vice presidents are seeing this information, but also working with the at the state level, trying, working with people at the chancellor's office, and also trying to reach out to around this issue of transfer, the CSUs, since that's where most of our students, transfer to, and trying to, get the information in front of them, as well. We try to work with, obviously, with faculty in our system. We're working with students, trying to get that information out there. So that's probably more where we focus, is trying to make sure that all the different players have access to the information so that it can inform their decisions about policy and practice.
Thank you for that answer. I'm taking it all in. Well, I just wanted to thank everyone who attended today. I want to thank the amazing Dr. Cooper. Don't forget to fill out a survey. The link is in the chat. And I hope everyone has a happy Monday. Goodbye.
Thank you for having me.
We're lucky to have you.